What's up, everybody? If you want to join the greatest online Star Wars community, the Fandom Menace, make sure you hit that subscribe button before today's video starts, so you don't miss out on any updates and you're always the first to know when our newest videos go live.
The following is a world-class Bullshitters exclusive.
Change Your Tune was a British music game show in which some of Britain's worst singers undergo weeks of training to improve their voices before performing for the nation. It was axed just after one series. Oh, really? Oh shit. It was just brought to my attention that I'm reading the wrong definition of change your tune. For the sake of our video, to change your tune is to change your opinion completely, especially because you know it'll bring you an advantage. That seems about right, thank you. If you don't like the phrase changing your tune, Flip-Flopper works just fine, and the internet's favorite pool shoe, Scott Mendelsohn, is back at it again. He recently wrote another article on Star Wars, this time changing his tune, calling Episode 9 the lame duck of the franchise. I'll spare you the fluffier parts of the article and get down to the meat and potatoes. In regards to the future of Star Wars, Scott Mendelsohn had this to say. How does it, Disney, make general audiences care about Star Wars movies that aren't explicitly connected to the first three Star Wars movies, Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, and aren't explicitly tied into the saga of the Skywalker family? Presuming Disney really does give Rian Johnson his own disconnected trilogy, and let the Game of Thrones guy make their own Star Wars movies, to say nothing of Jon Favreau's Mandalorian episodic series on Disney+, Star Wars will face a unique challenge. What will general moviegoers think about Star Wars that are mostly disconnected from the world story and characters of George Lucas's original trilogy? To what extent did folks flock to The Force Awakens specifically because it promised the return of Hamill, Ford, and Fisher? Since Episode 9 will apparently close the book on the Skywalker solo story that began in 1977, Disney must go back to the proverbial drawing board no matter how well this ninth Star Wars episode performs. We know that in 2019 and beyond, merely offering a relatively high-quality, mega-budget sci-fi fantasy actioner isn't enough to get people into the theaters. So without explicit ties to the Darth Vader saga, without explicit ties to the original trilogy characters, will folks still consider Star Wars movies to be worth trekking out to a theater to see? We don't know. Scram Mendelsohn, I'm cutting in. We do know if people will or will not go see a Star Wars property without original trilogy characters. We actually know more. People won't go see a Star Wars movie with legacy characters that aren't played by the original actors. Fans are tied to how things were, and any deviation from that will not succeed. Just look at Solo. A new actor attempted to play Han Solo, and well, let's just sweep that success under the rug. In all seriousness, we know that Solo failed, and Disney does too. They know that Star Wars fans are some of the most loyal and diehard fans out there. This is where a lot of online pundits will throw out the already stale phrase, toxic fandom, and try to discredit any criticism levied at Star Wars by the fans. They usually do this to kiss Disney's ass in the hopes of a spot at the table, aka exclusive access to content and grow their brand. They come off as disingenuous and untrustworthy. Fans pick up on this, and Disney knows we do. Another thing Disney knows is the power of nostalgia and emotional manipulation. It's why there are certain things incorporated into Disney Star Wars they choose to promote. J.J. Abrams announcing that they're using the same camera lenses from A New Hope. Disney bringing back the original three actors. Another Death Star. Another desert planet. Another snow planet. Incorporating the Millennium Falcon after the death of Han Solo and more. In the case of the Falcon, ask yourself, why is it there? Why is Chewbacca there? Is it because the story can't progress without them, or because its imagery attached to the original films that, in the case of Chewbacca, haven't changed at all and can be constantly used to tug at the heartstrings of fans while looking exactly the same? We all know what a powerful tool nostalgia is, but do we actually know what nostalgia is itself? Nostalgia is a sentimentality for the past, typically for a period or place with happy personal associations. The word nostalgia is learned formation of a Greek compound consisting of nostos, meaning homecoming, and a Homeric word, and algos, meaning pain or ache. Now, outside of the clinical definition, nostalgia goes further and hits closer to home in regards to the galaxy far, far away. This article from Quartz really breaks down what Disney has attempted to do with Star Wars, and I'm saying attempted because, honestly, they failed. Even Scott Mendelsohn has given up and changed his tune. But before we get back to our pal Scott, let's see how Disney is playing this now losing game. Nostalgia. It's delicate, but potent. It's a twinge in your heart far more powerful than memory alone. This device isn't a spaceship, it's a time machine. It takes us to a place where we ache to go again. It's not called the wheel, it's called the carousel. It lets us travel the way a child travels, around and back home again, to a place where we know we're loved. Don Draper, the smooth-talking executive from the TV show Mad Men, knew the economic power of nostalgia. Brands and advertisers from Kodak to Coca-Cola act as its puppet masters, pulling at heartstrings and lulling us into making purchases through the promises of the past. By tapping into our emotions, nostalgia encourages us to buy a piece of a memory, a moment in time when things seemed simpler and we thought we were happier. If the memories of how The Force Awakens was sold to you aren't starting to come back to you right about now, wake up. You may be dead. Disney knew how powerful announcing a new Star Wars movie with Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill would be. By the way, I put Mark Hamill last because he's barely in The Force Awakens. I'd call him useless in that film, but that would be unfair to The Last Jedi. Back to the article. The exploitation of nostalgia for economic gain is perhaps most readily apparent in the entertainment industry. Of the top 10 grossing films for 2016, only 2 were new properties. George Lucas in particular is often credited for taking full advantage of nostalgia's powers. His first blockbuster, American Graffiti, was a 1973 film that yearned for the simpler times of the 1950s and 1960s. In 1977, space western Star Wars heavily referenced the western genre, which peaked in the 1950s. Lucas has now capitalized on Star Wars' true value, which is how it lingers in our hearts. In 2011, decades after the original film screened, and in a year where no new Star Wars movie was released, over $3 billion of Star Wars toys were sold. So you're telling me that the year before Star Wars was bought out by Disney saw $3 billion in Star Wars toy sales? So Disney being the best thing ever must mean that Star Wars toys now exceed $6 billion, right? I mean, it's not like there weren't iPads, tablets, smartphones, social media, high-speed internet, and video games back then, right? We're now living in an era where Star Wars loses money for Hasbro, the same people making the toys in 2011, while brands like Marvel and action figures as a whole grew 10%. While I get back to this article, let's take a look at a new low for Star Wars toys. They're on clearance at a clearance store. Thanks, Disney. The companies tap into our emotional longing for simpler times. Never content with the cards we've been dealt, we keep turning over old ones, wanting to escape into their familiar embrace. Marketers know that reminding us of positive memories will also make us buy more stuff. Experiments show that advertisements that induce more nostalgia makes viewers like the ad more, which makes them like the brand more, and therefore increases their likelihood to buy that product. When large populations begin to seek the comfort of the familiar, media creators can profit by catering to their teenage memories. It's not that we've run out of fresh ideas, it's that the old ones are safer, money-making bets. I firmly believe that Mr. Ho was at the Lucasfilm meeting with Disney to decide the new direction of Star Wars. Or maybe Disney and Lucasfilm just went for the quick and easy buck and really didn't, I don't know, think about the future? The following quote is Ben Ho, the writer of the article, speaking in the first person, but it's important because it lays out the basis of his research. As a behavioral economist, my field attempts to simplify complicated, multifaceted social constructs like nostalgia by analyzing the general principles that underlie them. Based on my research, I'd like to argue that nostalgia's economic prowess is caused by the interplay between two competing economic forces, depreciation and appreciation. Now we're going to take a look at Mr. Ho's research and look at the comparisons to Disney Star Wars. I will be paraphrasing here, but I have a link to this article so you can read everything for yourself. One of the basic tenets of economics is the law of diminishing marginal utility. For most things we consume, we tire from repeated exposure. The second slice of cake is never as good as the first, and the third might give you a bellyache. This may be an evolutionary response to balancing our need to explore our environment versus exploit it. Primitive man on the savannah had to decide whether to search for new foraging grounds on the other side of the mountain or continue using the food sources they already knew. Likewise, a typical business school case study asks when a company should explore fresh business opportunities or continue relying on the prospects it already knows. A simple example of whether an entity might be experiencing appreciation or depreciation can be seen by looking at Google search data. Economist Seth Steven Davidovitz argues that data offers a uniquely honest window into the minds of internet users, revealing unexpected patterns in areas as diverse as our porn proclivities to predicting the flu and diagnosing cancer. Measuring what we're paying attention to is valuable because our attention invariably can be turned into dollars. When you look at the Google search frequencies for the word Avatar, the name of the highest grossing movie of all time, the trend, as with most media properties, experiences a sudden spike in popularity and then a gradual exponential decay into obscurity. The further we get away from the point of the original release, the more novelty fades, and consumers who have seen the movie once are less likely to want to see it again. That's an amusing parallel because it's the exact opposite that Scott Mendelsohn is banking his entire theory on. In Scott's Lame Dick Duck article, he states that if the next bunch of Avatar sequels break out, then Disney has the option of essentially alternating Star Wars and Avatar every Christmas. That will allow them to maybe just make one Star Wars movie every 2 years, which will allow for the brand to maintain a certain event status. You'd read Scott's reasoning, and on paper, it's sound. Avatar is the highest grossing film ever. People loved it, and they want more. Except they don't. And Scott knows that. Back in 2014, our homeboy Scott wrote this interesting article titled, 5 years ago, Avatar grossed $2.7 billion, but left no pop culture footprint. The article itself is a bit dull, a nice flashback to 2009 when the world was, there, but this is the most relevant part of the whole thing. Avatar, did not become a cultural touchstone in any real sense. Kids don't play Avatar on the playground, nor with action figures in their homes. There is little, if any, Avatar-themed merchandise in any given store. Most general moviegoers couldn't tell you the name of a single character from the film, nor could they name any of the actors who appeared in it. Avatar didn't inspire a legion of would-be Avatar ripoffs, save perhaps for Disney's disastrous John Carter. It didn't set the mold for anything that followed, save for its use of 3D, which turned the post-conversion tool into a valuable way to boost the box office overseas. If Avatar has any legacy at all, it is by normalizing or incentivizing studios to release their biggest would-be tentpoles with some kind of 3D modification in order to charge more money for tickets. James Cameron wanted to show the world how great 3D could be, and Hollywood responded by showing us how terrible it could be too. My favorite part is that these are Scott Mendelsohn's words. Kinda renders his whole event status argument useless. There's an opposite to depreciation, appreciation, and Mr. Ho's article has this to say. While depreciation is common to much of what we consume, it's also counteracted by an oppositional force, properties that gain appreciation over time. While the value of some properties wither away and depreciate as they grow older, others gain value with maturity and age. Economist Joel Waldfogel also likes to use the wine term vintage to describe the aging of media properties, as in Star Wars has a 1977 vintage. The wine metaphor is apt. It can be hard to predict whether a franchise will appreciate or depreciate with time. The value of a media asset, much like a movie or video game, depends on the popularity and the passion of its fans. Like a stock, the growth of these assets is not always smooth and can be buffeted by societal trends. There's a new societal trend. Well, I wouldn't call it societal, more like a manufactured trend, i.e. unnatural. It's known as getting woke, and we all know what happens when a company gets woke. There's a huge backlash when any company does this, and said companies usually take a hit. Remember Battlefield 5? They attacked fans and said stupid things like, "Don't buy it." What happened there? Yeah. This new trend turns off a lot of people from being consumers, and they begin to look to other avenues to spend their dollars. In the case of Star Wars, we know how we got to where we are currently. Defenders want to throw out sexism, etc., but we have her words to show her agenda is real. See our latest video for a more in-depth analysis. Since Star Wars has tried to become trendy, they've hurt the core group that kept it alive for such a long time and caused a schism in the brand. That's why there's such a vociferous battle among the fans, creators, and those in the media. Mr. Ho's article discusses the idea of social connectedness, and we know that with Star Wars, Disney has created the opposite. The economic study of conformity concerns itself with how our consumption choices depend on our connectedness to other people. Memories acquire meaning, not just in the connections made in our own mind, but in the connections of the collective consciousness. This gives Marvel and other franchises from the late 70s to early 90s, such as Star Wars, Blade Runner, and Jurassic Park, the perfect trifecta of economic forces to attract our entertainment dollars. Franchises that are 20 to 40 years old appeal to the nostalgic memories of those aged 35 to 55, which is the demographic where earning and spending power begins to peak. Take note, Star Wars. Franchises from that era are just also old enough for younger generations to view them as novel media properties anew, thus circumventing depreciation. This ability to appeal to two different generations is amplified by our social connectedness, which reinforces the whole package. And there's arguably a fourth factor that will see the cycle repeat in decades to come. Fast forward another 20 to 40 years, and the millennials who are discovering Iron Man for the first time might feel nostalgic for the remakes of the remakes, and the cycle begins anew. Except with Star Wars, it stops. The old generation became disenfranchised when we were called man-babies, sexist, etc. Star Wars is a great weapon in this culture war. It's being used to infuse modern politics into entertainment that, quite frankly, doesn't need it. Not only does it age these Star Wars films more than any dated effect or hairstyle could, but it also alienates the fan base. The man-baby slayer himself, Rian Johnson, was quoted as saying, "The goal is never to divide or make people upset, but I do think the conversations that are happening were going to happen at some point if Star Wars was going to grow, move forward, and stay vital." Except it hasn't. Star Wars is hanging on by a thread, and it has reached this point rather quickly. Astonishing, actually, how fast this former brand of brands has become a joke. Scorned fans want the next film, Episode 9, to fail, and those like Scott, who, shill as they like to say, are losing interest in defending Star Wars. In regards to the diminishing returns of nostalgia, this is all the fault of Lucasfilm and Disney. They've spent so much time on selling you the past that they've destroyed their future. They've created nothing of value that can stand on its own. Without the Star Wars label slapped on it, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi would be raked over the coals by critics instead of being blindly praised. Disney will have some goodwill with the fans, and they will come back for the theme park experiences and Disney Plus shows, but not as many as there should be. This is Star Wars after all. It would be silly to assume that the next generation will pick up and continue the Star Wars traditions of yesteryear because of a loyalty to something that they have no reason to be loyal to. That is why the phrase, "this generation's Star Wars" exists. Marvel movies are that for the next generation because Star Wars doesn't respect its past. What did Kylo Ren say about the past? That was more than just a line from the trailer. It was how Lucasfilm views its audience. They don't treat their characters too well either. We all love Lando, right? Look at how they treated him in Solo. Thankfully, he'll get his just due in Episode 9. Oh. Well, they ruined Han in 7, Luke in 8, so it's only fair in the name of equality to screw over Lando too. Rest in peace, Lando, you old softy. So that's it for today, folks. What do you guys think of this situation? It seems funny that our favorite shill, Scott Mendelsohn, is kind of backtracking. Oh, it's the lame duck. It has no power. It could be great. It could be terrible. It doesn't matter at this point. That's what we're getting out of this whole situation. It doesn't matter. They've given up. The shill's lost, Mr. Lebowski. The shill's lost. But like rats on a sinking ship, they're just going to move on to something else after the property that they've driven into the ground dies and burns up. And I think there's a common misconception about the fandom menace in channels like this. I don't want Star Wars to die. I don't want it to go away. We can go back to 2011 and we talk about the article. Star Wars had $3 billion in toy sales. I'd like to go back to a time where I can consume Star Wars merchandise or the old movies or a new TV show and have a good time. The Clone Wars was must-see TV even at 20 years old. When I'd get back from going out on Friday nights, well, I had it recorded on my computer and I watched it on Saturday. So there is a happy medium, a sweet spot where we can be with Star Wars, but we choose not to. And again, Star Wars is just the biggest piece of this culture war and entertainment. If Star Wars falls, then everything will go because Star Wars is the biggest thing. So that's why we talk about it. That's why we discuss it the way we do. It's not too late to save it. Much like Luke thought about Darth Vader, I sense the conflict, there's still good in you, and all that other happy crap. But we gotta let as many people as possible know what's going on and how it's been treated. And I think we're in a good place right now with Disney because they are backtracking quickly. In many ways, it feels like Disney and their associated group of people have kind of just brushed Episode 9 under the rug already, and they're moving back to the original trilogy. See Star Wars Galaxy of Adventures, see The Mandalorian, and the myriad of new Star Wars products that are coming out very soon. Before we go, I do want to bring up one thing, this whole Kiri Hart situation. I know a lot of people want me to talk about it. So, Kiri Hart, the head writer of the Lucasfilm Story Group, has disappeared from the website, and people don't know if she's been fired because she's only being listed as a consultant now. She's moved on to other things. If she's been fired, if the Lucasfilm Story Group is getting a big shakeup, well, I think that's a good thing because people at the top know what they're trying to do isn't working. We throw around this word agenda quite a bit, but it's very blatantly obvious what these people had in store for Star Wars, and thankfully, being the fan group that we are, we saw through their crap, their lies, their deception right away, and we called them on it. And now, just a few short years later, they're about face. So hopefully all future brands, all future entertainment companies, all future movies and TV shows try to avoid infusing this agenda into pre-existing things. Save that for Netflix because you can see from a mile away the garbage that Netflix pumps out all the time. You can have their crappy shows, their crappy sitcoms with the canned laughter about identity politics. That's fine, let it go rot on Netflix. But it doesn't belong in Star Wars. So folks, if you liked this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, share it all over social media, and tell everyone about World Class Bullshitters. If you're a fan of this channel and you haven't already, check out our Patreon page. $1 a month goes a long way, but $5, which is only 17 cents a day, goes even further. You get exclusive access to digital content, you can be on the show, and a lot more. But if you can't afford it, not a big deal. Just go over and join our Facebook group. It's a lot of fun, and go make some friends and hang out in the community. One final note. If you wouldn't mind, check out our friend Yakov Merkin's Galaxy Ascendant series. It's a fantastic science fiction epic, and you know what? It replaces the void left in your lives by Disney Star Wars. So go ahead and check that out, and until next time, folks, be excellent to each other.